Before big money contracts in Saudi Arabia awaited global stars, before Chinese capital flooded the transfer market, even before a little known club from Dagestan throwing rubles upon rubles to secure star signings, and Christopher Samba twice. Before all of that, and roughly around the same time, MLS is offering football's greatest aging talents a chance at one last payday, a club in Uzbekistan set their sights on securing the signature of one of the sport's biggest names, Samuel Eto'o. Although, interestingly enough, the hero? That doesn't sound right. Let's just stick with the word protagonist. The protagonist of this story did eventually find himself collecting that sweet Dagestani dosh playing for Anzi Mahachkala, but that would be a few years after spending the summer flirting with a side from another former Soviet state. They say it takes not one, but two to tango. Eto'o and Bunyotkor, or is it PFC Kuruvici, spent the summer of 2008 dancing with one another. However, they did not produce the stanky leg, which oddly enough was released around the same time all of this Eto'o Uzbekistan business was going down. Sadly, we did not get that. No, what we ended up with was the waltz of the most random soccer summer transfer saga in perhaps all of history. Barcelona had just completed a fairly disappointing 2007-08 campaign, which saw them finish third in La Liga and fail to win a major trophy for the second consecutive year. This saw manager Frank Rijkaard shipped out and replaced with, well, a former player, although a relatively unknown commodity at the time, Pep Guardiola. Wonder whatever happened to him. Anyway, he wanted to remake this Barcelona squad to fit his pressing style. One of his first orders of business was to ship out a trio of star players who didn't quite fit the mold of what Guardiola was looking for: Ronaldinho, Deco, and Samuel Eto'o, or maybe he just didn't like people whose names ended with O. Whatever the case may be, he did manage to find new homes for Ronaldinho and Deco. The striker, though, he was a different story. Even though he had dealt with some injury issues during that previous campaign, he was still scoring at a really high level. In fact, he led Barcelona in goals in that 07-08 season. Additionally, his wage demands were astronomical. He didn't want to play just for anyone, and Eto'o had developed a reputation of being a bit of a prima donna. This was, after all, a player who once refused to come on in the La Liga game as a substitute. As the summer 08 transfer window opens up, there's some talk around Eto'o. Spurs are linked with him for a hot minute, but his wage demand scuttled that potential transfer. Then on July 14th, 2008, Eto'o's new home, his next club, is finally revealed, and it left everyone, well, really confused, puzzled. There were a lot of heads being scratched at this announcement. PFC Kuruvici announced on their official website that they had signed Eto'o to a 3 to 6 month contract that would have paid him $26 million. There's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, you're probably wondering just who the hell are PFC Kuruvici? That is a fair question to ask. Fans of football deep cuts will recognize them as FC Bunyotkor. That name change from Kuruvici to Bunyotkor is actually happening as this transfer saga is playing out, only adding to the sense of confusion here. Anyway, the Uzbek club was founded in 2005 and shot itself all the way up to the first division in no time flat. Yet there was no real figurehead. No one was claiming responsibility for this overnight sensation of a soccer club. People in the country did know who was running it, they just really weren't at liberty to say. The rise of Kuruvici/Bunyotkor was widely seen as a pet project of then Uzbek president, or should I say autocratic ruler, Islam Karimov, who signed a decree providing football clubs with tax breaks as this whole Kuruvici business is happening. The team somehow managed to secure lucrative sponsorships with 8 of the country's gas companies, this of course being Uzbekistan's main source of income. The team's principal was a powerful local businessman, but that wasn't the real story here. Everyone sort of knew that this soccer team was more political tool than football club. Unsurprisingly, given the vast resources at their disposal, Kuruvici finished second in the league in 2007. The following season, they're in the midst of a title-winning campaign, and they've also advanced to the knockout stages of the Asian Champions League. Oh yeah, as all of this is playing out, a huge rebrand and a new name, trying to sign one of the world's best strikers, the club is smack dab in the middle of its season, both domestic and continental. Someone eventually relayed the news of Eto'o's potential move to Uzbekistan to the folks in charge at Barcelona, and their response was, "K?" They didn't dismiss it entirely. In fact, here's what a club spokesperson went on record with saying in regards to the potential transfer of Eto'o to Uzbekistan. "Nobody at the club knows anything about this. I don't think it's very likely."
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Seriously, Barcelona could have nipped this in the bud right then and there, and they didn't. What happens? Well, this Eto'o to Uzbekistan story then takes on a life of its own. That's because the striker is traveling to Uzbekistan along with Barcelona officials for some youth camps and PR opportunities. Meanwhile, Kuruvici framed the trip as him coming to Uzbekistan to sign a contract to play for their club. Barcelona, meanwhile, didn't outright deny this, and the player was kind of just like, maybe I might be signing with him. Everything on the trip goes well enough. A few days after it ends, Barcelona announces a partnership with Kuruvici that'll see them play a friendly in Uzbekistan, as well as letting the team use Barca's facilities on a visit there. No contract between the Uzbek side and Eto'o is agreed upon, despite them claiming it was going to be signed, and this is where the entire transfer saga gets a little fuzzy. On his way back, Eto'o says, "Well, I'm going to think about their offer." We can be absolutely certain that Kuruvici offered Eto'o that 6-month contract for $26 million or whatever the case may be. That was real money that happened, and they had the funds to back it up. We also know the striker gave some serious consideration to the offer. He said as much in the years since. What we don't know is if Kuruvici or Bunyok or whatever you want to call him actually submitted a formal transfer bid for Eto'o with Barcelona. That seems unlikely. Those running Kuruvici never mentioned a formal transfer bid being placed with the Spanish side. That probably has everything to do with Eto'o never signing a contract with the club or making any sort of agreement with them. It is believed the striker's agent, Josep Maria Saiz, had to talk him out of putting pen to paper on that Uzbekistan deal. His logic was one very much with the future in mind. If Eto'o agrees to go play in Uzbekistan, even for 6 months, it really was going to hinder his potential for future earnings back in Europe. Eto'o's reps knew any future deal would be for a lot less if he went and took that bag. Also, there may be some prominent clubs who just opted to pass on him altogether, not wanting to deal with the headache the striker potentially brought to their club. Despite never agreeing anything, that didn't stop Eto'o from trying to weaponize that offer later on in the summer in an attempt to get his current club to treat him a skosh nicer than he felt he was being treated at the time. There's a famous exchange between the new Barcelona manager Pep Guardiola and Eto'o in which the forward tells his gaffer that he got a huge contract offer from Uzbekistan and he'll take it if things don't change. Pep then urges him to take the deal. He's like, "That's a pretty sweet offer. Maybe you should go play in Uzbekistan," and that pretty much ends the bluff right there, and with it any last remnants of Eto'o potentially playing in Uzbekistan. The striker stays at Barcelona for the 2008-2009 season, which he scored 36 goals in all competitions and was instrumental in the club's treble-winning campaign. That being said, he and Guardiola spent most of that season hating each other. They really did not get on, and that would be his last in Spain. Kuruvici became Bunyok and moved on to other targets after Eto'o stopped returning their calls. They would sign Brazilian legend Rivaldo, fresh off his really fairly underrated stint in Greece. They also brought aboard Zico to manage the side, which would advance all the way to the Asian Champions League semifinals in 2008. He leaves after half a season, but Bunyok once again makes headlines when they sign Luis Felipe Scolari to be their next manager, and he, by the way, fresh off that disastrous stint at Chelsea. They made Scolari the highest paid coach in the world. The club only lost one game across 2009 and 2010, which was mostly due to them outspending everyone else in the Uzbek league by a substantial margin. The party ended for Bunyok after winning the league in 2013. They haven't won a trophy since, and in 2024 they actually finished 10th in the league, their worst ever top flight finish. The decline coincided with the Uzbek government focusing on other ways to repress the public, or whatever it is dictators like to do. Karimov passes away in 2016, family members are indicted, it's a messy situation over there. Finally, Eto'o may not have gotten that Uzbekistani bag, but he did collect a huge post-Soviet state payday when he signed for Anzi Mahachkala in 2011. They gave him 20 million euros a season for a couple of years' work. It was okay, not quite that 26 million for 6 months he would have gotten with Kuruvici or Bunyokor. Then again, winning the Champions League with Barcelona and then Inter Milan was probably worth the trade-off. There have been a lot of crazy transfer sagas in the world of football over the years, but none were quite as random as Samuel Eto'o swapping Barcelona for Uzbekistan. It remains to be seen just how close he actually was to putting pen to paper, but when you look at how everything unfolded, the chances were certainly north of 0%. Bunyokor had the money to make the deal. Look at how much cash they threw at Scolari. I mean, this was a financial juggernaut and they were willing to spend. They weren't the issue here. Barcelona, for their part, probably didn't want to negotiate a transfer deal with their Uzbeki counterparts. They were focused on developing these business relationships. That's the money they wanted. Transfer talks are always far more contentious, and any conversations over an Eto'o fee would have hampered their other business dealings with Kuruvici, which is why the Spanish side didn't ever say no. They didn't close the door on it, but they threw the ball in the striker's court where he dribbled it for a while. He thought about shooting his shot, but was eventually talked out of it by his agent and other advisors. They knew the long-term ramifications of that deal would have a negative effect on Eto'o's career. Remember, it's still a while before we get players coming back from China. Once you started going and collecting those huge paydays, it was more or less assumed you were retired. The real takeaway from this story, though, is that when someone is telling you something isn't very likely, what they're really saying is,
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah!
hey, a chance is a chance, right? Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know more about Spain's forgotten yo-yo club, the yo-yo club people don't talk about, Granada CF, that would be in the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And to learn more about Laurent Robert, one of the funnest players to play in the Premier League and a few other places during the 2000s, that would be the video in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback. Don't tell me to call it football. And as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.